To Mik'd Up, we were talking about the Saints before we went into that last little bit of a commercial break. We're knocking off some of the rust. Lloyd misspelled an email address. That's okay.
I didn't misspell it, I would say, but
I'm not making you mad.
He added an S to his email.
We've been gone for 2-week hiatus. It's fine. I'm not blaming you or anything. We're good.
I'll take the blame.
Ross Jackson from Locked On Saints, host of Locked On Saints. He is in the waiting room, so I'm not mad at you. He's here. He's ready to go. We were talking Saints. We were talking about what are the Saints going to do now that they have a first-round pick and they have 2 second-round picks. We talked about the trade of Sean Payton, and all we can do is speculate. We can talk about what we see, what we hear, what we read. Ross has a lot more insight than we do.
Yes.
So I cannot wait to talk to him. Ross, I appreciate you coming on.
Hold on.
Okay.
He's here.
There we go.
Jackson.
There we go. Ross, I appreciate you coming on the show, man. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, guys, my absolute pleasure, man. I appreciate you having me on. I do love the little French swing to my name, though, that Ross Jackson.
Jackson.
Little accent.
When you in the city, baby.
Yeah, we're down in Louisiana, man. You gotta add a little French.
And it's
to
that
it.
time of the year, like we're coming up on Mardi Gras. Yeah,
That's it. Man, look, I'm not gonna keep you for too long. Obviously, the biggest news in the NFL right now, outside of Tom Brady retiring, obviously that's the biggest news of the day.
No, I'm just playing.
Yeah. Well, apparently now people want to talk about, whatever. That's a whole different topic. But the second biggest news is Sean Payton, the trade finally going through, decided on the team, decided on a trade partner. He goes to Denver. The Saints get back at the 29th overall pick, plus a second rounder. They throw in, Lloyd just thinks they just said, oh, here's a third rounder just for shits and giggles, which obviously that's not how that worked. Talk about the trade. How do you think the Saints panned out? And what are they going to do now with the picks? Are they going to keep them or are they going to package them to try to move up and get a quarterback?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll start here with the trade. Like, how was it a good trade? All that. I think that this is a good move, a good trade for the New Orleans Saints. I know that a lot of people were kind of expecting this kind of John Gruden type package of a pair of first round picks and a pair of seconds and all that. But we're comparing 2 different situations, right? The Tampa Bay Buccaneers paid a premium to basically yank John Gruden out of his active contract in a role that he was actively filling when it came to the then Oakland Raiders. When it comes to the New Orleans Saints, it's a job that Sean Payton stepped away from an entire calendar year ago. And so really the real comparison to the Sean Payton trade was the Bruce Arians trade or the Herm Edwards trade. It's really those. And you're talking about day 3 picks that the originating team in that trade got back from the team that they traded them to. And in one case with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they got a Super Bowl out of that thing.
Yeah.
So they were more than happy to give up that day 3 pick. So when you're the New Orleans Saints, you have a coach that was not going to be a part of your team's future moving forward. That's not a part of what it is that they're doing anymore. That is history for them at this point. Getting a first-round pick for that guy is outstanding because you basically just got a first-round pick for a guy that was never really going to be a part of your plans moving forward, again, for the rest of your franchise's history in the first place. So that's a good move for the Saints. The other thing is swapping that third-round pick for the second-round pick. It's like an NBA pick swap, right? We call it a different thing in the NBA than we call it in the NFL. We palletize it in the NBA. We call it a pick swap. Here, we're like, oh, well, they gave up a third-round pick and they got a second-round, to help get that second-round pick, which is true. But, that's a part of what their sort of plan was. The other piece is how they use that 29th overall pick. And the fact of the matter is that they have a lot of different avenues they can go. As you alluded to, they could package their, let's say, 29 and 40, move up to the mid-round. They could package their 29, 40, and first for next year, move up to just outside the top 10 and grab a falling quarterback, a la the Kansas City Chiefs back in 2017. There's a lot of different ways that the Saints can go. The key, though, is finding a way, if they're going to draft a quarterback, to do so in the first or second round. 75 quarterbacks in the last 10 years have been drafted beyond the second round. One of them is a bona fide starter in the NFL, and that's Dak Prescott. And where are we there? So when I think when you look at where the New Orleans Saints are, they have to invest early in a quarterback, whether it's packaging and trading for a veteran or utilizing those picks in some way to be able to draft a quarterback early where you have a much higher hit rate on those quarterbacks.
Do you think we've been hot on this topic for about the last 10 minutes? Do you think they package and go after one of these big names, or do you think they stick to their MO, either stay at these spots and draft from the spots, or package and go and grab someone that you're like, wait, who is this? And that obviously ends up with the way they've done it turning out to be a
Just
very, very good player.
Tell me they don't like Anthony Richardson all that much.
We kind of just want to see him stay away from Richardson and Levis a little bit,
Yeah, I haven't heard anybody come out and fully say, yeah, I like Anthony Richardson. So I don't know. Right. I don't know if that's the way that they're going. There's always some caveat, right? Yep. A friend of mine who covers the Florida Gators, Brandon Olson, once said, Anthony Davis, well, I don't want to talk about Anthony Davis.
He's still good, he's still up there.
You mean street clothes?
But Anthony Richardson, he said Anthony Richardson couldn't hit the side of a barn if he was throwing a side of a barn. So I'd be a little bit worried about that, right? Like if you have a guy that can hit all three levels of the field but can't accurately place a pass, then you're going to be a little bit concerned about that. So it's a Josh Allen thing. So can he be Josh Allen? Can he not be Josh Allen? Very likely he's not, but there's always a chance that he could be. But I think that's such a huge risk. So I think that like the first place that you start, and this is what Dennis Allen told us, is that they're basically using the, looking under every stone, like leaving no stone unturned approach. So they're going to look at free agency. They're going to look at the trade market. They're going to look at the draft. They're going to do everything that they can to find that next quarterback. And that might mean that they find another starter, or they go out there and they trade for a veteran like a Derek Carr, or it could mean that they go out there and they sign a bridge quarterback. Let's say they bring Andy Dalton back, for instance, and then draft a young quarterback in come on now, and then you draft a young quarterback in like a Hendon Hooker or something like that. What I mean? Somebody that you're looking to further develop.
That was going to be my next question, right? You talked about they can go and sign a guy. We talked a little bit about the free agent market, right? The quarterback market. I feel like the quarterback free agent market this offseason is a little stronger than it has been in the past, right? You have guys who have experience. Yeah. You have guys who have played. Jimmy G is not going to be in San Francisco next year. They came out and said that this year. Would that be a fit necessarily say, hey, we're going to give you like a 1 year prove it deal, go sign Hendon Hooker maybe in the second round, develop him behind a guy? Like, is that something that they would like to do? I don't know if you probably don't have that obviously answer. You haven't said, hey, Mikie, like, what are you going to do? But, but is that something that seems like up the Saints' alley, or do you think that they're probably going to go for someone, hey, we'd rather get a guy for a multi-year deal instead of having to do the whole 1 to 2 year deal like we've been doing over the last couple of years?
Yeah, you probably err on the side of trying to do the multi-year deal for a more proven veteran quarterback first, right? That's probably the first place that you try to go. Instead of worrying about translating somebody to the NFL, this person has already played in the NFL. We know who they are in the NFL. Is that something that we can build around? And if the answer to that is yes, then that should probably be the first place that the Saints go. That's the first stone to turn. After that, then you start to look at, okay, where are maybe the shorter term deals that the team can grab and say that person is going to be our starter until we find our next quarterback. Or they go the route of a 1 year, $10 million deal to bring in somebody to be at the helm for 2023 and then draft a quarterback that they want to get ahead of in 2024.
Now, obviously, the quarterback situation is the name of it. Like the Saints have seen, you've seen what it looks like when they don't have a quarterback that you can rely on day in and day out over the last couple of years. Now, they need more than just a quarterback in this draft. They have the ability to draft more than just a quarterback in this draft. You look at Cam Jordan, he comes out on Twitter and he talks about what are we going to do? And he said, hey, we need defensive line help. What other target areas are they looking at to fill their needs in this draft?
Yeah, running back's got to be a big one, I would think, and that's no shot at Alvin Kamara, right? It's what do you have around him? Right. Benjamin was picked up off of waivers, so you still have his 2023 as a part of his contract. He wasn't fully a free agent, so it didn't reset his contract terms. So they picked up that extra year in his contract. So they've got Benjamin going into 2023. But then they signed, David Johnson to a 1 year deal. They've kind of wrestled around with the idea of undrafted free agent running backs over the course of the past couple of years. Tony Jones Jr., Abram Smith, who, didn't make it to the active roster, but was somebody they were excited about when they brought him in. And outside of that, they've been dealing with, some injuries and things like that as well. Latavius Murray showed up for a little while, all that. So when you look at where they are now, you have to have somebody that can be that change of pace back with Alvin Kamara. And there are a couple of those guys in the draft, or Roshan Johnson, for instance, out of Texas. And everybody's talking about Bijan Robinson. Right. He's going to be, he's going to potentially be a first round running back. I don't really like the feeling of investing a first round pick in a running back. A lot of wear and tear, a lot of injuries. They take a lot of hits, all those good things.
Especially with AK still there too.
Yeah, exactly. So you're looking for somebody that's going to be able to be that change of pace with him. You can find that Tajay Spears out of Tulane, has been an absolute star here in Mobile for the past couple of days. The Saints are going to be meeting with him tomorrow, according to Assistant General Manager and VP of College Scouting, Jeff Ireland, who we spoke to today. The other place that you're looking for, though, is like you're going to need somebody not only beside Alvin Kamara, you're going to need somebody in lieu of Alvin Kamara for maybe, a handful of games or so, because there is a potential looming suspension as well, right? So you're looking for real high caliber running backs here, not to the place where you're going to go out there and try to sign a Josh Jacobs or a Saquon Barkley or anything. You ain't got to break the bank on these guys, but you are going to be looking for a running back in the draft that you like, that can fit in your system, that doesn't telegraph run or pass when they're on the field, all of that, which means they have to be solid in pass protection, they have to be solid as a runner, and they have to be solid as a receiver out of the backfield as well. But so you're looking for that in the draft, talented player that is going to translate, as opposed to rolling the dice on an undrafted free agent. So I would put running back up there for sure.
Speaking of target areas, how do you think they go about addressing this defensive coach vacancy situation right now?
Yeah, this is a big one for them. I mean, if we would have spoke at the end of the Week 18 loss and I said, hey, February 1st, this team's going to be replacing a coordinator, you probably wouldn't have expected it to be the place where they had two coordinators in one position. But that very structure kind of, snuck up on him here. Ryan Nielsen hired away as the Atlanta Falcons' sole defensive coordinator. Going from co-DC to sole DC is a promotion in the eyes of the NFL, which means you can't use a club block. You can't stop it from happening. So you just kind of have to watch it happen. Today, the kind of curious decision of parting ways with Chris Richard, which if I'm trying to figure out a way to make that make sense, my thought is probably that, they might have gone to Chris Richard and said, hey, we want you to be the sole DC. And Chris Richard said, all right, do I get to call plays? And they're like, no, that's Dennis Allen. Right. And so he wants to go call plays. And so they're saying, okay, we're going to make sure you get your opportunity to get ahead of the cycle, go out there, go find your place where you can call plays. Right. Now they have to find somebody. If I had my druthers, I'm calling Steve Wilkes right now from over at Carolina, who should be a head coach right now, and say, hey, come be a DC for a year and then hit that coaching cycle again next season. Come look really good with a defense that's looked really good. And then if the defense doesn't look good, it's not on you. It's that the entire defensive staff was changed over, right? And so that saves a little bit of Steve Wilkes' outlook going into 2024. Right. So I love that idea. The tricky part here is they're going to need one DC. They're going to need a defensive line coach, and they're going to need a secondary coach. Secondary coach you might be able to solve in the building. Corey Robinson has kind of been on that trajectory, came over as a defensive assistant for Maryland, has been with the Saints for a few years now. He's here coaching up safeties with the DB class here in Mobile. So he's somebody that can step in there. But then you got to go find a defensive lineman. I think they should go out and find a defensive line coach the same way they found Chris Richard years ago. Go find a guy that's got some defensive coordinator experience, like an Ed Donatel, who just got let go over in Minnesota, and bring him in as your defensive line coach and let him translate the game for you. So there's a couple different ways they can go with it, but there's a lot of experience and there's a lot of options out there. The DC market has a lot more bodies than jobs, unlike the offensive coordinator market right now.
And now I'm glad you mentioned the offensive coordinator, right? Because if I told you 2 weeks ago there's going to be a coordinator's position open in New Orleans, I think everybody would have thought it was going to be the offensive coordinator spot. I don't think they would have thought, that both DCs are going to be gone. As Dennis Allen being a defensive guy, I feel like I have a little bit more confidence in him finding somebody to be on the defensive side. Do you think, because Pete Carmichael was with Sean for so long here in New Orleans, was super loyal, is Sean going to try to bring him with him over there to Denver, and that offensive coordinator position is going to be open? Or is Pete, hey, I'm going to stay here, and this is where I'm going to be, and I'm going to work on changing the way I called plays in 2023?
Yeah, great question. I think more likely Pete Carmichael is here in New Orleans, and that he's just looking at being a different offensive coordinator than he was in 2022, right? He's looking at revamping.
He's a fine defensive coordinator.
But, he's one of those guys that, is going to be charged with revamping the philosophy and revamping the approach. I think that for Sean, if you want that guy, I could see him going after Joe Lombardi.
Yeah.
I know Joe Lombardi wasn't a fantastic offensive coordinator in his couple of runs in Detroit as well as over in Los Angeles as a play caller, but as a loyalist to Sean Payton, as somebody that understands the system, that knows the shorthand, knows how to translate, knows what it is that Sean Payton's looking for, and that is a good quarterback coach where you need to improve a struggling veteran quarterback right now. Joe Lombardi is somebody that I think will I would say that's probably my top, trying to forecast where Sean Payton goes at OC. But look, him and Pete are tight. They're close. And so we'll see exactly what happens there. Maybe if he gets down the list a little bit far enough, he calls up Mikie. But the big thing here is that one of the things that Mikie Loomis said during his end of year press conference was, one of the things that he told us in the media room is that the Saints aren't going to allow any lateral moves over to Sean Payton. They're not just going to sit back and let that happen. Like, Sean Payton's, they're friends, all that. Like, they're cool, they're bros. But he's like, I'm not trying to lose my staff to Sean wherever he goes, right? So there would be a situation there to where the Saints could step in and say, yeah, I know you want that, but we can't let you have that. So call Joe. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I could see something like that also taking place.
You talked about Lombardi being the guy who can develop quarterbacks, right? Does Pete Carmichael have that card in his pocket? Like, is he going to be able to develop a quarterback? Because if you're going to go out there, listen, if Sean was still the coach here, and I said this 20 minutes ago before you came on, if Sean was still the coach and you said, oh, we're going to trade up and we're going to go get Will Levis or Anthony Richardson, I said, okay, go get it. Because I trust that Sean and the crew are going to be able to develop this guy, and they see that. Does Pete Carmichael have that ability to say, you know what? We're going to draft a young guy, and I am confident enough in myself to be able to develop him into the quarterback that we need and the quarterback of the future?
That's one of the biggest questions that Pete Carmichael and the New Orleans Saints staff may have to answer in 2023, going into 2024 even, right? You give them a year to develop a guy or whatever. We haven't seen that, right? We haven't seen the Saints go out, draft a quarterback, and develop that quarterback into a starter. Right? In the Sean Payton sort of landscape, we watched them draft Garrett Grayson. That didn't take off. We watched them draft Ian Book. He was around for a year. And, of course, we watched the whole fiasco with Tommy Stevens when they wanted to draft him and turn him into a tight end. And then they only drafted him because they didn't want him to end up going to Joe Brady over in Carolina. And then he ended up with Joe Brady in Carolina and then eventually fizzled out. And so I don't think we've seen that from this New Orleans Saints coaching staff, Pete Carmichael or otherwise, yet. But we've also only seen Ronald Curry with one young quarterback, and he only got 1 year with him in Ian Book. So maybe Ronald Curry is the guy that could develop. Maybe Pete Carmichael is the guy that could develop. But that's a question they have to answer and that they have to prove in the coming years.
And to one more question on the Pete Carmichael front, do you think, obviously it doesn't feel like they're going to make a change. If they were, it would have happened during, what do they call it, like Black Monday, whenever all the coaches get fired. But you have a guy like Cliff Kingsbury who's out there. I don't know if he wants a job or if he's happy with whatever the buyout is from Arizona and to not coach again. But if the Saints need to make a move because the offense wasn't what it should have looked like, especially under Sean Payton. So he got a lot of credit for when he took over play calling under Sean Payton, and he scored 40 a game, but it felt like that was a lot of Sean Payton's fingerprints. Do you see them making a move and maybe trying to go out and get somebody maybe a little bit younger and get some fresh blood in?
There's a potential for something like that. I mean, if they're gonna go after a guy like Cliff Kingsbury, they're gonna have to buy him that one-way ticket back from Thailand because he's chilling.
I don't think he's going anywhere.
Well, they got to get him to answer the phone first.
Yeah. I mean, if I was him, I wouldn't be in any hurry either. I mean, dang. But I think I look at Cliff Kingsbury and I think he's somebody that's going to be excellent when he gets back to the college ranks, right? Like that's really what you're looking at for a guy like that, to give him some opportunity to maybe climb his way back over to the NFL. But the thing that's interesting about that proposition is, do you find that young guy and bring them into a positional coach spot and then groom them into being a future offensive coordinator? Start the Ronald Curry process over again just in case you lose him. Right? So that way you have a guy like Pete Carmichael who this organization clearly trusts and feels can come in and make the adjustments in 2023 that they weren't able to make in season in 2022, whether that be because everybody was learning their new jobs, their new responsibilities, whether that be because of injuries, roster turnover, whatever it was. They'll have to answer those questions in 2023. They clearly trust that he can do that, because effectively what they told you is that the issues that we had in 2022 are centered around the people that were on the field in 2022, not necessarily on the sideline, when they turned around and said, we're not really making any changes. on the coaching staff, particularly over on the offensive side. And so now they're being forced to changes on the defensive side. There's a world in which they're forced to make some changes over on the offensive side, but doesn't seem that those are going to be drastic changes like the offensive coordinator position. But if you, let's say, lose a Ronald Curry who gets an offensive coordinator role somewhere, you bring somebody in to be that pass game coordinator, that quarterback coach, and then elevate them and develop them over the course of the next couple of years so that you have that OC waiting in the wings for when, Pete Carmichael is no longer the OC, or when he moves on, or when whatever happens, right? So there is sort of the grooming effect that you can restart just like you did with Coach Curry if RC ends up heading elsewhere. So that's maybe the spot where I think maybe you look for that young guy, at least in 2023. But if the position's open in 2024, the secret to offensive coordinators is that you always want to be a year early on them, not a year late. Because if you're a year late on offensive coordinators in the NFL, they're head coaches already. It's too late. They're expensive. So you have to get a year ahead. That's why when, Sean McVay got his shot, everybody said, well, he hasn't done anything yet. Doesn't matter. You know what he can do. You think you know what he can do. So you have to be a year early on him. So that's kind of, my example there. So I think that that's the route that you go at that point. But for right now, maybe you try to sneak one of those kind of whiz kid guys into one of those position roles if you have it available.
So we all know comparison is the root of all evil, right? So I'm about to ask you to go ahead and dish us some evil real quick. 3 to 5 years right now, or even further down the line, when we look at this trade, in your mind, who wins?
Oh, man. That's a tough one. And the reason why I say that it's a tough one is because the criteria is different for both. For Arizona, for Denver to win that trade, they got to win a Super Bowl with Sean Payton at the helm, right? For the Saints to win that trade, they have to draft somebody in the first round or draft somebody or do something in connection to that first or second round pick next year that turns into a starter, that turns into a Pro Bowler, that turns into, a star. Yeah, exactly. And that doesn't mean that they have to win a Super Bowl, right? So because what Sean Payton achieves in Denver can't be compared to what he might have achieved in New Orleans, because New Orleans didn't just willingly trade him away. He stepped away, right? So no matter what, they were without Sean Payton. So the fact that they turned that into a first-round pick means all they have to do is turn that first-round pick one way or another into a viable star that's on their team for, let's say that timeline, 5 to 6 years, right? Whereas Denver has to now win a Super Bowl in the next 5 to 6 years for me to look at it, to turn around at that time and say, all right, Denver won that trade. But then if they win a Super Bowl and the Saints have a bona fide star that they picked at 29 or that they used that pick to trade up for, then I could say that it was a win-win situation, right? So the criteria is just so very different between the two.
So if 5 years from now, we're sitting here looking at Denver with
Hopefully in 5 years, I'm sitting in a different studio.
Different studio. We'll upgrade it, better. Do all that stuff. We're sitting here and we're thinking about Denver with 2 AFC championship losses and the Saints, let's see, with a 2-time Pro Bowler. In your mind, who wins it?
Super Bowl is king.
That's a win for the New Orleans Saints at that point, right? Because I don't think you can say 5 years down the road that any person in the Denver organization said, yeah, we traded for Sean Payton. We paid him $20 million plus per year, traded a first-round pick, traded a second-round pick so that we could get to a couple of AFC championship games, hopefully. Right? That's not the goal for them.
2 for 9 for AFC championships. The 2 for 9 for AFC championships.
Right. And so, I look at, what is it that their goal is by bringing in Sean Payton? Their goal is to win Super Bowls. And right now, their goal is to win a Super Bowl with Russell Wilson. So that makes that time frame even shorter.
All right, I have a question for you. Just to the way that the Saints front office has been, they've been very aggressive in the trade market. Obviously, they gather some picks. Do you see them moving up in the first round to try to find that quarterback of the future, or do you see them standing pat?
I think you're waiting to see who drops out of the top 10, right? I mean, look, Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, they ain't dropping out of the top 3, more than likely. And so then you're looking at those guys that y'all mentioned earlier that you're a little bit nervous about, Will Levis, Anthony Richardson. But if the Saints fall in love with either one of those guys, because I can see the Saints loving Will Levis, for instance. So if they're in love
they
with
have him on the roster, Taysom Hill.
Right. Well, a little bit different. But I see what you're saying. But I see what you're saying. But, if they love a Will Levis and they feel like, over the course of the next 10 years of his career that can develop into a starting quarterback and a star quarterback, then yeah, you move up to 11, 12, 13, right? Or whatever. So that you can go and get that guy. You better make that move for a quarterback, of course, but that's what you're looking at doing. So I think that if Will Levis gets drafted in the top 10, then that means that they're very unlikely to move, right? They're very likely to just stand pat at that point, unless Anthony Richardson is in the 20s, which I'm not sure that happens, but if he's in the 20s somewhere and they really like him and they need to move up a couple of spots to get him, then sure. But I think that's the thing, is that you're watching to see how the board falls. And so if you get outside the top 10 and 4 quarterbacks are gone, then no, you're not going anywhere. You get outside the top 15 and 4 quarterbacks are gone, unless they moved up into the top 10 to, just outside the top 10 to grab one of those guys, then no, they're not going anywhere. And so, that's where I think you stand pat at 29. You invest in interior defense, or you grab a Hendon Hooker, for instance, who would be a great second round selection, but maybe you want the 5th-year option on him. Yeah. And then, you invest that pick there as you stand pat.
And you don't see a situation, obviously, because of the Dennis Allen scenario, where they're able to tank for.
No, I told you the tanking is not a thing, bro.
I'm just wondering, because you saw the Sean Payton and his reaction to Caleb Williams out there and how much he likes him. And the last time he was that infatuated with the quarterback, it was Patrick Mahomes. So him having that blessing almost from Sean Payton feels like somebody that the Saints would almost consider, but Dennis Allen being in that scenario that he's in now can't tank. Right?
As you can see, Lloyd likes to conspiracy, and he tries to force his take
narrative.
Somehow. Yeah, he likes to force it. That's okay. So you don't have to. You can just.
Yeah, we got 3 top 60 picks to tank. That's what we're gonna do with those.
I would. You build for the future.
The other thing that I'll mention in that, though, is in that same conversation, one of the things that Sean said was that there's only 2 times in which you can look back and say, I've seen tanking in the NFL. And then he mentioned that Caleb Williams would be the type of talent that would kind of inspire that. But that's going to be for teams that are already at the bottom of the NFL. The New Orleans Saints traded away their first-round pick in 2023. Why? Because they thought it was going to be a late first-round pick. They expect the same thing going into 2024.
I respect it. Ross, man, I appreciate your time. I know you're busy. I know you're in Mobile. You're covering the Senior Bowl. I appreciate it's a little late. You're probably exhausted. One quick question about the Senior Bowl. How has it been? How has Mobile been? There's some guys from Louisiana there, obviously LSU, and then Tulane. So how has the atmosphere? It's a little colder. Probably the weather's a little wet. But how's the Senior Bowl been?
You see me in a sweater.
Yeah.
You see me rocking a sweater.
It looks good. I like that sweater.
This is a nice sweater. We ain't wearing this in New Orleans, though. You know what I mean? This is the Mobile sweater.
Well, that's Kevlar.
No, it's been great. It's been great, man. It's been dope. Tajay Spears has been, the Tulane running back has been the star of the Senior Bowl out here. Dorian Williams is looking good. Ali Gay's getting a lot of attention. Like these guys are out here being Louisiana football prospects, and that's a lot of fun to see.
Awesome.
And Mobile continues to be outstanding, not only for us as media, but also for the players. Their opportunity to get to learn financial strategy going into the NFL, how to translate from college to the pros, all those other things. The things that we don't see that are really important that they do are incredibly dope. So I continue to love and will always say that the Senior Bowl, they say the draft starts in Mobile, and I think that's true. I think the Senior Bowl is the top all-star game that's out there for these college players.
Nice. How's Stetson Bennett look?
Oh, stop it. Okay.
Who?
Stetson?
Oh Lord, I don't know. I'm not. No, I try to stay away.
That's
from
a good.
those.
That's probably a good. That's probably a good.
No, last one.
He usually gives a disclaimer when he tries to set you up. That's usually what he does. He hasn't done it.
Lloyd's done.
He give you the short end of the stick.
Ross,
it was either that or over/under on Reese's you've had.
I appreciate y'all.
Yeah, I appreciate you, man. Thanks for coming. Enjoy the rest of the Senior Bowl, man. We'll have you back on again.
Thanks. Always appreciate y'all. Y'all stay here. Stay safe, right?
All right, man. Thank you.